This is episode 4 of the Cathouse Hollywood podcast. Let me ask you a question. Do you know the true history of the Headbangers Ball? Hell, do you even know the origin of the word headbanger? Do you? What band used the word headbanger first? I bet you don't really know. Portions of this podcast are brand new, and some have been posted before. But as I promised in the first 3 episodes, I'm going to be editing, remixing all the best episodes and recording new ones. So by all means, subscribe to this podcast, download this podcast, leave us a good review, and most important, tell your friends so I can keep this thing going for free. This episode has a little bit of everything, but it's focusing on the start of the Headbangers Ball and the end of the Headbangers Ball. And we even go back way before the Headbangers Ball even started. I'm recording this show October 2nd, 2023, but who cares? I'm focusing on a time that happened well over 25 years ago. I've been blessed with some of the most incredible jobs. I've been on a bunch of TV shows, including some fun reality shows like Daisy of Love and The Rock of Love. I ran the greatest rock and roll club called the Cathouse. I had a successful run in talk radio. I even worked in wrestling. In motorsports, I've worked for NBC Sports and Fox. I had a racing radio show called Racing Rocks that was on the radio every weekend for 20 years. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging right now, but I have ridden a motorcycle coast to coast 14 times, and I've donated close to $250,000 to charity. It doesn't matter what I have done. It doesn't matter what I will do in the future. I know that I'll always be thought of as that guy that hosted Headbangers Ball on MTV. I hosted that show from 1990 to 1995. Headbangers Ball was shown all over the world. Headbangers Ball had been seen by millions of people who would spend their Saturday nights watching me. And many of those would watch and think to themselves, I could do a better job than that guy. We're waiting outside. We're on Highland, another warm Southern California night. We're walking up to the club. And yes, there is a line, but remember, you're my friend. We don't wait in line. Let's walk through the doors. Let's climb up the stairs. Why don't you go over to the bar right there, grab yourself a Blacktooth grin. Oh, okay, here's a drink ticket. You good? Okay. Let's talk about the Headbangers Ball. And let's do it inside the Cathouse Hollywood podcast. So, like I said, I'll probably always be known as that guy from Headbangers Ball. And there was a time that I kind of downplayed those 5 years I spent on MTV. I was busy trying to make a name for myself in talk radio, TV, and motorsports, getting a lot of shows, getting rejected for a lot of shows. And no matter how successful my other projects or shows were, and like I said, a lot of them weren't, I was always reminded by people that I was that guy from Headbangers Ball. And then I thought about it a little bit. Maybe you could call it soul searching. Usually, people will stop me and tell me that they grew up with Headbangers Ball, which of course makes me feel really old, especially when I see someone that to me looks like a really old person, and then they come up and tell me that they watched me when they were growing up. But for me to just like kind of brush off people's memories of the Headbangers Ball, that's kind of a dick move, so I'm coming clean. I mean, the Headbangers Ball was truly important to millions of people all over the world. I don't think for a second that I, Riki Rachtman, am the reason the show was so popular. I know that I was just a host. And Headbangers Ball was an outlet for people that wanted heavy music. Of course, everyone's opinion on what heavy music is totally different. And yes, there were a lot of fans. And yes, there were a lot of haters. And the haters, well, they tend to be a little bit more vocal. They had no problem voicing what they liked and, of course, what they didn't. And remember, this was before the internet. Thank God there wasn't internet at the time. I might have had a hard time dealing with some of this stuff. But we're going to go back to before I was the host of Headbangers Ball, before Jamie Josta was the host of Headbangers Ball, before Adam Curry, Kevin Seal, or Julie Brown were the hosts of Headbangers Ball. Because, yes, all of them were. I'm going to go back before there was a Headbangers Ball. And we're going to get to all of that after I remind you that the Cathouse Hollywood podcast is powered by Cathouse Coffee. Yeah, it is. You got to know that Cathouse Coffee is not me just throwing a label on a bag and calling it Cathouse Coffee. I, Riki Rachtman, am the president of the company. Leah Vendetta is the CEO. It started with a visit to plantations in South America. Then we took classes in America with the Specialty Coffee Association. We've met with roasters. We go to the roasters. We pick up the coffee. We stick the labels on the bag and ship it directly to you. Cathouse puts out really good coffee. I promise you. If the Cathouse name is on it, I ain't fucking around. This is good. No, this is great coffee. This is going to be your new favorite coffee. Go to cathousecoffee.com and use the code CATHOUSE37 and you'll get 10% off. Remember, that's CATHOUSE37 at cathousecoffee.com. What is a headbanger? What is headbanging? Look, I don't need to research this one at all. If you listen to some killer music with a heavy beat, you can't help it, right? I mean, I know I can't. If you played Walk by Pantera or Black Sabbath Paranoid in front of a baby, not too loud, of course, well, that baby will start bobbing his head forward and backward instinctively. I don't have kids. I have no idea if this is really true and probably shouldn't try it because your kid might turn out like me. But if you play the song Leper Messiah by Metallica, there's going to be a set of neurons located deep with the brain's medial temporal lobe, and it's going to produce a reaction that causes your head to move forward and back, forward and back. You are headbanging. Now, when was the term headbanging first used?
Don Delamont, and I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm also known as the Great Southern Brain Fart. The first time I ever heard the term headbanger, believe it or not, was right after Quiet Riot's Mental Health album came out. And I was listening to it, and it was right around the time I had just gotten into heavy metal. And my dad heard me listening to Mental Health, and the part where it says bang your head, my dad said, "So what does that mean, bang your head?" And I kind of showed him, and my dad said, "Oh, so you're a headbanger?"
Ricky, my name's Tarek, Grand Rapids, Michigan. First time I really heard the term headbangers, probably like 13, was Halloween. And me and my buddies, we'd always go out trick-or-treating and we'd change costumes, go back out. We were at my buddy Eric's house, and his sister was playing the record the song Bang Your Head by Quiet Riot.
And from Studio City, California. I think it came from England, because that's where we saw the guys in the videos banging their heads.
Hey, Ricky, this is Tad in Johnson City, Tennessee. First time I ever heard the word headbanger was in the Sammy Hagar song Heavy Metal from the movie when it came out back in 1981. Yeah, I'm getting old.
Ricky, this is Matt Daly calling from the Pacific Beach section of San Diego, California. The term headbanger was coined by Motorhead fans. Motor headbangers, as Lemmy detailed in The Decline of Western Civilization, Volume 2. That's where it came from as far as I'm concerned.
That is up for debate. Some of you say, oh, the LA band Quiet Riot in 1982, they released a song called Mental Health, and that song was also released under the name Bang Your Head. Kevin Dubrow, who is the singer Quiet Riot, says, bang your head several times in the song. Bang your head. Mental health will drive you mad. Bang your head. Wake the dead. Bang your head. He never really says headbanger, but that doesn't matter because I had already heard the term headbanger way before that. Anybody that listens to this podcast knows of my love as a teen for punk rock. To the uneducated listener, punk rock may all sound the same. But just like you've got heavy metal, there are a whole bunch of different genres and subgenres and tribes. Some may mistake oi music, which was a type of punk rock, as the type of music for skinheads or white supremacists, which is not entirely true. In the 70s, there was a group of punk bands that catered to all genres of punk rock with an emphasis on the disenchanted working people in the UK. They weren't racists at all. These were bands like Sham 69, Angelic Upstarts, Cox Bar, and a band that I really liked, the Cockney Rejects. And sure, they sang about unemployment and lyrically voiced their contempt for political figures, but they also had like really fun songs. The Cockney Rejects released their first album, and that album was called Cockney Rejects Greatest Hits. Yeah, you got that right. This was Cockney Rejects' first album, and the album was released as Cockney Rejects Greatest Hits. That's great. I guess it was the all-time greatest hits because that was all the songs that they ever had. In 1979, on the Greatest Hits album, their debut album, they had a song called Headbanger. This is 1979, and listen to these lyrics. I can't resist loud music. I could hear it until I drop. I've got scruffy jeans and biker boots, and my hair is like a mop. Headbanger. So, Cockney Rejects first used the term headbanger, right? No. Lemmy has mentioned that the term headbanger was taken from the term Motorhead Banger, which was the fan club and fanzine of Motorhead fans. I would never doubt Lemmy on anything, ever. The first Motorhead album was released in the summer of 1977. If you are a crazy, true, hardcore Motorhead fan, you might know that there was a Motorhead album released in 1975. Okay, let me take that back. There was a Motorhead album recorded in 1975, but that album was shelved and ended up being released in 1979 after Motorhead was already starting to get big. So, for discussion's sake, Motorhead's debut was 1977. The Motorhead Bangers were formed shortly after that. I had heard the word headbanger at least a year before that. It was on an album that I owned as a kid. This was my first recollection of the word headbanger. The album was called Leave Home. It was released way back in 1976. It was the second album from the Ramones. The song was called Susie is a Headbanger. In the lyrics, Joey tells us that Susie is a headbanger and that her mother is a geek. But even though he says the word headbanger over and over 7 times, there's no reference to rock or being a rock fan. The inspiration for Susie as a headbanger was a 1947 film called Nightmare Alley. And it was the story about a mind reader, and there's a guy that eats live chickens, and well, it doesn't have anything to do with music at all. And that was put out in 1947. And just a side note, because I really like horror films, Guillermo del Toro is going to be doing a gnarly remake of this movie, but I'm getting sidetracked. So, who invented the word headbanger? I just mentioned a reference from 1976 with a song called Susie is a Headbanger, but that doesn't mean that they invented it. The truth of the matter is, I'm not exactly sure. But that's the first time I heard it, 1976. There is another source that could be the first time headbanger was used, and this was in 1969 during Led Zeppelin's first U.S. tour. During a show at the Boston Tea Party concert venue, audience members in the first row were banging their heads against the stage with the rhythm of the music. I don't think they were literally banging their heads on the stage. I don't know. But allegedly, that was where the term headbanger was coined. By the way, if I play metal music in my house, my African gray parrot starts banging his head. So in the animal world, I guess it's just normal that when you hear this really good beat, you start to bang your head. So we now move to the term Headbangers Ball. Of course, I didn't come up with that because the show had been on MTV for years before I became the Headbangers Ball guy. And from what I can tell, The term Headbangers Ball was not created by MTV. There was a DJ in the UK, his name was John Brent. I don't know John Brent. I never met John Brent. Ironically, it seems like we have a few similarities. Back in the early 80s, John would do these like events where he would play hard rock and heavy metal music, sort of like what the Cathouse was in the early days. It wasn't bands, he was just playing music, and people would go and hear this DJ play music. From what I would gather, he did these shows like once a month, and he even did stuff like used props, like he had a pirate ship. All night, all he would do was play metal. My club in America was Cathouse. John Brent's night was called Headbangers Ball. Yeah, he had the title first. He would do these Headbangers Ball shows from different venues, and he'd also compile hard rock and heavy metal charts for magazines like Sound and Kerrang, and the charts were called Headbangers Ball Rock Charts. Now, let's go back to America. It's 1985. I have yet to even open the Cathouse. Bands like Guns N' Roses are just starting to form. Motley Crue is in a total glam phase with Theater of Pain. David Lee Roth had recently gone solo, released Crazy from the Heat. Kiss didn't have makeup at that time, and they released Asylum with the song Tears Are Falling. Slayer had Hell Awaits. But the charts were dominated by the biggest albums from the biggest acts. Bruce Springsteen, Madonna Like a Virgin, Princess Purple Rain. In 1985, Twisted Sister had released Come Out and Play. That same year, Dee Snider showed the world he wasn't some dumb guy in a metal band. And I know I've referenced this on the show, but I'm going to reference it again because it's very pivotal. Dee Snider, the singer of Twisted Sister, found himself giving testimony to the United States Senate Committee on Commerce in a congressional hearing on record labeling. If you recall the PMRC, they were trying to expose all the evil vileness that lurked in the lyrics of heavy metal music. PMRC leader was Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife. She claimed that one of the Twisted Sister songs, Under the Blade, encouraged sadomasochism, bondage, and rape. In the testimony, Dee Snider replied, and I quote this, "The lyrics she quoted have absolutely nothing to do with these topics. On the contrary, the words in question are about surgery and the fear that it instills in people. I can say categorically that the only sadomasochism, bondage, and rape in this song is in the mind of Miss Gore." That's classic. Showing that he could talk as well as rock. Oh, God, did I just say that? He got together with MTV. They created a show that featured heavy metal videos, and that show was called Heavy Metal Mania. The show was only on once a month, but it was the precursor to the Headbangers Ball. I guess you could say Dee Snider was the first host of Headbangers Ball, but it wasn't called Headbangers Ball. It was called Heavy Metal Mania. And from what Dee tells me, he hosted the show, and then he wanted to get paid to do it, and then MTV ended up canning Heavy Metal Mania. So 1986 comes along. It's a glorious year for hard rock and heavy metal. And no, I'm not just saying that because in September of 86, me and my roommate Tammy Down, a Faster Pussycat, opened the Cathouse. Rock was big in 86. It wasn't only just rearing its ugly head, it was a carnivorous beast with sights on taking over. Bands were playing arenas. Bands were selling records. Heavy metal bands were selling millions of records. Guns N' Roses were on the verge of breaking. Hell, everyone was. And when a band would make a video, sometimes it would get slipped into rotation at any random time. Motley Crue had the Home Sweet Home video, but you could easily play that between Cyndi Lauper and Whitney Houston. Cathouse at this time was thriving. Metal was thriving. But 1986 passed without a venue to showcase heavy metal on the music channel. In 1986, I didn't have MTV. I had no money. Come on, what do you think I'm going to do? Spend my money on cable TV or whiskey? I drank a lot of whiskey back then. 1987 comes along. The biggest selling album on the planet is Appetite for Destruction. The Cult releases Electric, which I've said before was a big game changer. Def Leppard Hysteria, Anthrax Among the Living, Faster Pussycat released their debut album. Motley Crue releases Girls, Girls, Girls. This is 1987. There's new albums by Dio and Whitesnake and Aerosmith and Ozzy and Motorhead. And metal is selling records, lots of records. And metal is selling out arenas. MTV in 1987 started airing this show called 120 Minutes, which featured, and I don't know which other word to use, it featured alternative artists, bands like the Jesus and the Mary Chain and the Replacements, Morrissey, Dinosaur Jr. It was a specialty music show. So rather than bring in a new host that was part of the underground fringe music, they would just use the same VJs that were playing the popular music during the day. So you had your J.J. Jacksons and your Alan Hunter and Downtown Julie Brown and everyone's favorite VJ, Martha Quinn. The point is, 1 minute, Downtown Julie Brown is leading into How Will I Know from Whitney Houston, and then a little bit later, she's playing Skinny Puppy or Iggy Pop in 120 minutes. So the show did all right, gave MTV a little credibility in breaking some new bands or giving artists that were only known by the cool few exposure to the masses. You know, what if that same formula was done with heavy metal? And I'm just guessing here, but knowing metal fans, I'm sure that there were quite a few complaints when Dee Snider's Metal Mania was taken off the air. So MTV figures, okay, let's see what happens if we play a bunch of metal videos in a block of programming. Of course, we know metal is a very subjective term. To some, metal is Slayer. To some, metal can be Poison. So when I say the word metal, it is the most general of terms. Surprisingly, even though there was no internet or a place to showcase metal videos in 1987, a few bands still spent a little money on production to make music videos. So MTV decides that they're going to try a late night metal show and use the title that DJ John Brent used in the UK. I have no idea if there was like a deal struck up or if they just used it without asking. What I do know is April 18th, 1987, the very first episode of the Headbangers Ball debuts. Who was the first host of Headbangers Ball? What was the first video ever played on Headbangers Ball? I'm going to dive deep into the beginning of the ball, but first I want to tell you about 1 Foot in the Gutter. That's right. I do this show, Cathouse Hollywood Podcast, for free. I have no advertisers, so once in a while I'm going to shamelessly do a little self-promotion, okay? I have a show called 1 Foot in the Gutter, and perhaps some of you have seen it, or you heard about it, or you're about to see it. The show has been getting stellar reviews, and it's odd for me to talk about the praise that the show is getting because it's very personal. It's my show. I get up on stage, and I tell some stories from growing up in Hollywood, opening up the Cathouse, hosting Headbangers Ball, drug dealing, jail time, bankruptcy, porn stars. Oh yeah, I guess there's a few stories you might not have heard. I also have videos in the show and photos. And while it's kind of just me standing up there telling you stories, part of it is almost kind of like a play. I recall my childhood getting turned on to heavy metal, and it's just really cool to see so many people at these shows. And I want you to go see my show, 1 Foot in the Gutter, because I'm on tour right now, and I'm going to share a few dates really quickly. and then we'll get back to the show. One Foot in the Gutter is coming to Florida. Hey, after doing close to 40 shows, so many of you told me, you got to bring your show to Florida. You got to bring your show to Florida. Okay, I'm bringing it to Florida. So go buy some tickets, okay? These are definitely going to be the final shows of the year. November 4th, One Foot in the Gutter is going to be in Melbourne, Florida at the King Arts Center. November 5th, I will be in Daytona Beach at the Bank. The road crew passes for both of those shows are already sold out. The VFI passes, at the time of me recording this, are almost gone. I don't know if they're still here. And there are tickets available for both One Foot in the Gutter shows. November 4th in Melbourne, Florida, and November 5th in Daytona Beach. If you haven't been to my show, just go to Facebook and just read the reviews. I'm very, very proud of the One Foot in the Gutter shows, and I think you need to get a ticket, and you need to join me because I promise you, we're going to have a good time. Get your tickets today. Do not wait. Go to cathousehollywood.com. That's cathousehollywood.com. Oh, by the way, in 2024, I'm coming back to Charlotte. It's 1987. Cosby Show and Cheers are the biggest television shows. Police Academy 4 is number one in the movie theaters. I didn't even know they made 4 Police Academies, but let alone that Police Academy 4 was the number one movie in the theaters. In 1987, gas was 89 cents. The average monthly rent was $395. In 1987, The Simpsons debuted on television, and April 18th, 1987, MTV debuted the Headbangers Ball. Gotta go big when it comes to the metal community. Who are you going to have host the first show? I have to say, the first host of MTV's Headbangers Ball was the perfect first host. You had Motorhead's Lemmy and Phil Filthy Animal Taylor. All I can say is they were in rare form. It was the Lemmy that I know and the Lemmy that we all love. He got it. It's rock. People, don't be so damn serious. My God, this is metal, and Lemmy wasn't that serious. I don't like the serious stuff. Lemmy wore swimming goggles, and he introduced himself as Jacques Cousteau. At one point, Phil got hit in the head with a dustbin. Lemmy told a story about finding Ozzy with his pants around his ankle. And I'm not going to assume anything because I don't know for sure, but you guys know that I was friends with Lemmy, and I've seen him with a